This period of the Ashikaga supremacy was due, certainly not solely, but in a very big way, to the efforts of one man, and that is Ashikaga Yoshimitsu, the third Ashikaga shogun, by far the most important, the most successful of these shoguns, and one who, through many of his artistic and cultural pursuits, really helped shape Japanese, certainly Japanese high culture, perceptions of Japanese high culture down to this very day. He was the third shogun, but he was the first to be born in Kyoto. He was the first shogun to be born expecting to rule, expecting to have people obey him, and he had a sense of charisma that was also matched by a sense of polish from having grown up in Kyoto, close to the, well, in the artistic center of Japan, close to the imperial family, and he thus, in his person, and he was very clear about this also in many ways, displayed this quality, kind of unified the military and the cultural, the sword and the riding brush. If there was a person who embodied that concept, it was him, Ashikaga Yoshimitsu. He was the person to end the Nanbokucho period. His armies did start winning victories. He did manage to attract many samurai who had looked to the southern court for sponsorship over to his side, and eventually became more and more clear that the southern court was going to lose. He also, as I said, was very polished, and he made many connections with the imperial family, with the northern branch of the imperial family, and he showed himself to be a person who was very different from the stereotype of the boorish, uncultured head knocker that the samurai had been laboring under this image. He did a lot to raise not only the power but also the prestige of the Muromachi Bakufu, and the leaders of the southern court really knew that their days were numbered. And so, Yoshimitsu in 1392 unified the imperial court. Emperor Kogon of the northern branch was recognized as the legitimate emperor, and that bleeding wound in the side of the Muromachi Bakufu had been removed. He also was not content, Yoshimitsu was not, to be controlled by regents. He came to power at a very early age. I believe he was 10 when he was appointed shogun. He lived under a series of regents for a while. He then threw them off. And he also was very, very careful to court religious institutions. He was a great patron of Zen Buddhism in particular, and he sponsored many religious processions. He endowed temples and monasteries. He repaired temples, and he gained the trust and the support of the religious establishment as well. We did talk about Buddhist monasteries a little bit, but now I think it's also important to realize that they were very much, and had been throughout the Heian period, military powers in their own right, landowning powers in their own right. Great monasteries like Hiesan, or great religious centers like Hiesan, a mountain outside of Kyoto, was home to very powerful monasteries which controlled the countryside, and this was throughout Japan. People, as we've talked about before, left their land to the monasteries either in order to avoid taxes, or when they died, And the proceeds from this land were enough to ensure monasteries supply to samurai of their own. And so Ashikaga not only unified the imperial court, he also courted, that is, he snuggled up to many of these religious monasteries, and he patronized especially the ones he liked, and in general saw himself as a great patron of religion and of the arts. And he kind of got the seal of approval of many of these religious centers, Enryakuji, Niidera, others, who now were certainly not about to disarm and to follow, basically to give up their land to the Ashikaga, but who were not going to make trouble for Ashikaga Yoshimitsu in particular, and they swore loyalty to the shogunate, but really, since Ashikaga Yoshimitsu was Ashikaga Yoshimitsu, he could make his voice stick, and these monasteries kind of went along with what he said. He was also much better at controlling local areas, far-flung areas of Japan away from Kyoto. He did this through many mechanisms, most of which were ultimately aimed at controlling these powerful daimyo, these powerful samurai lords, or at least in restricting their behavior to the degree so that they would not be able to do too much damage by rebelling all the time. He, as I said earlier, created this system of appointing, or he kind of perfected the system of appointing powerful daimyo to the post of shugo, to these Ashikaga-approved regional leaders, and giving them control over wide swaths of the countryside that they basically then proceeded to treat as their patrimony, with the understanding that they followed ultimately Ashikaga orders. He also campaigned to subdue powerful local rivals. He was not above killing people who opposed him, and he also made religious pilgrimages himself very often, which actually did a lot to display Ashikaga power in the countryside. This is very much a feudal system, where you have lords and you have vassals, and a lot of times these vassals are very forgetful of why exactly they should be loyal to this or that lord, and being there in their land with all of your powerful armies, with your magnificent objects of art, with your great tea collection, etc., etc., it was a way of reminding people in these local areas who was really in charge, and that was Yoshimitsu. So these religious pilgrimages, while they were useful to him as a spiritual being, they were also very, very useful to him as a ruler. Excuses to meet with these local daimyo, to exact his feudal dues. He also, as I said, encouraged daimyo to live in Kyoto, especially many daimyo from central and western Japan. And he also created what was called the Kanrei system, basically a senior administrator of the Ashikaga shogunate, who was responsible for kind of mediating contact between local warrior institutions and central Muromachi government bureaucratic institutions. And the bureaucracy also did expand. There were a series of 3 great families, the Hosokawa, the Yamana, and a third one on which I'm unfortunately blanking right now, who kind of alternated being Kandei, being these senior administrators, and by sharing this power with some of his most trusted advisors, who were also related to him by blood. Yoshimitsu set up a system where you really did have something approaching permanent samurai government institutions. These were not based on the previous imperial family model, where you had all of these governors being sent out into the provinces, recalled, being sent out again. These ties with these local samurai were mediated by a great number of factors, and they were certainly imperfect, but they grew up organically from warrior society. What else did Ashikaga do to control events in areas outside of Kyoto? He was very good at creating and maintaining a shogunal army. Something that went in armed force that went beyond just a collection of Ashikaga House vassals, but was now becoming identified as an army of something that us moderns identify as the state, as opposed to the person who rules the state. And he also did keep control of many areas of Japan directly. There were Ashikaga government offices in Kamakura, in some other parts of the country, in Kyushu, overseeing some controlling somewhat trade with China, which we shall also get to. And this mix of direct and indirect control basically ensured that the Ashikaga had something approaching a system of government which offered them maybe not perfect control, or certainly not perfect control over all of Japan, but at least a degree of control over most of the major processes within Japan, with the understanding that as long as they followed Ashikaga directives, local daimyo would still get to administer their own areas as private kingdoms. Ashikaga Yoshimitsu also was very, very good at drawing on commercial revenue. And it's not just him, but all of the Muromachi shoguns drew very heavily on the commercial community of Kyoto as a source of revenue. Many samurai, certainly the Muromachi shoguns, also were very much more directly involved in commerce than were samurai of pretty much any other area. And their placement in Kyoto, in the great center of consumption in Japan, really helped to aid that. And the Ashikaga also, in particular, and Yoshimitsu also very much in particular, worked to develop and maintain commercial contacts with China, which was still far and away the more developed, economically developed society when you compare China with Japan, and was the center of a great many luxuries: silks, teas, objects of art, religious objects, just all sorts of products of this great advanced system with great merchant houses, with ties all over the world that really the Chinese market was. And Ashikaga Yoshimitsu worked very hard to plug Japan into this, and especially in a way that benefited the Ashikaga family.